Amanda, thank you so much for joining us here at SuperReturn. There's been a lot of conversation about the effects this pandemic has had on this industry, but particularly you were focusing in your panel today on co-investment and how that's been affected. What would you say you've seen happen in the last 18 months?
At first there was a halt in everything, which was quite expected. I think people had other priorities, but we've seen a huge bounce back, particularly second half of last year, 2020. That created a lot of supply and demand as well. And I would say particular these last 6 months, I think from our side, we've never been busier. And when I speak with our investors, that's exactly the same.
With that sort of environment, what caution do you have to apply and what are the challenges within that sort of environment itself?
I think while there is a huge demand from investors for co-investments, we did a survey a while back and about 80% of our investors ask for co-invest. But given the supply that's available right now, a lot of them are just so stretched, both in terms of allocations, but in particular in terms of bandwidth and resources. So that's obviously something you have to mitigate.
And what sort of deals are you seeing as being most popular? Is there a very thematic investment going on, or is it sort of still looking at more geographic areas? What are you seeing as the key trends?
If I look broadly, and this is not in regard to Triton, I think there has been a huge uptick in anything to do with health, anything to do with e-commerce, anything to do with technology. And I think that is to some extent a result of the COVID and the pandemic. If I look at us at Triton, it's a lot more about what is the core of what we're doing in terms of our strategy. That's what we've been continuing to do. And that's also the type of investments where we have dialogues with investors about syndications or potentially a co-lead.
And obviously you have your fiduciary duties throughout all this, but do you think this industry and your company certainly looking more at what their perhaps social responsibilities are with, a pandemic having affected the world the way it has?
This is something that I personally has been really positively surprised about, because in previous crises, when you had something, ESG, things that are more societal, people have sort of ignored a bit. But here it's actually had the completely opposite effect. ESG has always been a very important part of what we do. It's been an integrated part of how we work. And I'd say we've taken it a step further. A day ago, we announced that we're now going to do zero emissions. So that's one thing we committed to. We're also going to have science-based targets for our portfolio companies. That's something we're going to roll out. And we recently hired a person to head up sustainable investing. We're not going to be an ESG fund as such, but I think sustainability, bringing that element into our strategy, both when we do sourcing, but also when we work with our investments, is going to have an even greater impact. So he's working hand in hand with our head of ESG. So I personally think that's very exciting.
Obviously excellent for the greater good, but presumably that makes business sense too, because all of those factors are going to be risk factors going forward.
Absolutely. And I think that's the exact point, that today you can actually see the impact it has on your top line as well as your bottom line. And at the end of the day, if we sell a business, people are going to look to how is it going to be in the next 5 years. So I think this is very much about future-proofing your investments. And as Rubenstein just talked about, climate change is one of the greatest challenges we have ahead of us.
When you think about future-proofing, what approach are you taking and what do you see as the key challenges now in the next, say, 5 years, having got through a global pandemic?
Tough question. I think ESG is definitely one aspect of it. Another one is digital. I think digital is not just, some have, they focus on digital. For us, it's an element that goes across all our sectors, all the investments we do. It's part of our sort of whenever we look at an investment. And then I think the third aspect, and that's another challenge, is talent. You have smaller population, a huge competition for talent. So how do you keep attracting and retaining talent? And this is where, since I joined the industry quite a while ago, I think we're fishing in a much broader pool. So the kind of talent you can attract and you want to attract has actually broadened, which just talks to the toolbox that private equity is using today.
Because diversity is proven to better the bottom line.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think diversity is not just about being diverse, but it's also being inclusive. So what we've recognized is diversity is a lot more than gender. And if you have diversity, if you don't have an inclusive work environment, people are not going to stay. So at Triton is something we've been focusing on for quite a number of years. We set some hard targets already in 2016 as to gender diversity. I think we're one of the few private equity funds. I went on stage at our annual investor meeting and we committed to targets. And we've been reporting on it ever since.
Why is it so important to have that diversity in a team, and what does it bring? You talk there about it not just being gender, but sort of cognitive diversity too.
I mean, everyone has sort of read about the studies. You want to avoid group thinking, as you said yourself. You know, you make better decisions, and I think that's very true. If you're looking to buy businesses that are going to do well in the next 5 years, the broader experience, the more voices you have around the table, I think the better. And then from a sort of very personal aspect, I think it's also more fun that we're not all alike.
And what difference does it make to be able to come to an event like this and share all of those insights with colleagues all in the same place again?
It's great. It's absolutely amazing to be back in person. The kind of dialogue you can have with people in person is so different. So I'm just glad that we're back to a bit of a normality. It's a bit overwhelming when you step in and you're like, wow, there's so many people, but it's good.
Do you think it makes a difference to the action that's taken in an industry when you can really properly share those ideas and collaborate across companies as well?
I think so, because all the Zoom meetings, you typically have an agenda that you run through, and it's very sort of boom, 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 we're all on a schedule. But here, you're not at the same tight schedule. So, you know, it's a much more free-flowing conversation, and that generally, you know, creates better ideas.
Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation today, Amanda. Thank you so much for joining us. Great to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Emma.